That's why I have well-qualified bailiffs around, just to make sure we don't do something like that. Mr. McMichael, I remind you that you're under oath. Yes, sir. All right. Let's go ahead and get the panel.
All right, Terry Austin, as the jury starts to come back into the courthouse, and we will see Travis McMichael get back on the stand. It looks like, we got Alex too, great, outside the courtroom, or outside the courthouse there. So, Terry, it looks like this issue of Travis McMichael allegedly using a racial slur will not be brought in. Is that right? Because it looks like Roddy Bryan, who's the one that claims Travis made a racial slur on the day that Aubrey died, Roddy Bryan is not going to take the stand now. So it looks like this is not going to be an issue. Is that how I understand it?
Well, the judge has reserved his decision on that matter based on the fact that Roddy Bryan will not be getting on the stand. You heard Goss say he's not getting on the stand unless, in fact, all of the charges are dropped against him. So it wasn't a hearsay, and it wasn't necessarily the fact that there was a 404 problem. The problem was the confrontation clause. And we know that Dial, Special Agent Dial, testified at the grand jury that Roddy Bryan told him that that's what Travis said. So the problem is Bryan, who's not going to get on the stand, doesn't have an opportunity to defend himself. So that's the confrontation issue. So the judge is going to look at these cases. He's going to determine whether or not that can be brought up to Travis, who is on the stand. So we'll see what happens. It's 50-50 as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think, Alex?
Well, Terry has the expertise on this, but that's how I interpreted it as well. And you heard the prosecution basically trying to figure out one way or another how to bring that conversation or what Bryant heard into this trial. You anticipate it's going to be a central role in them proving that Travis McMichael had some animus towards Ahmaud Arbery in those statements that he allegedly made.
Go ahead and proceed to the evidence.
All right, guys, stay with me. We're going to go ahead and dip back in now. You are watching live coverage of the Ahmaud Arbery murder trial as Travis McMichael, the co-defendant who took the stand yesterday in a bit of a surprise move, will be back on the stand as we begin now. The prosecution getting ready for questioning. You were transported from the scene to the police station. You began your interview with Detective Nohilly at approximately 3:12 in the afternoon. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. I agree with you.
All right. And it ended approximately 5:30. Is that right?
Sounds right.
All right. So this was like about 2.5 hours of an interview.
Sounds correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the interview began 2 hours after the shooting.
Yes.
And you recall that during that time frame, they gave you an hour to write up 3 pages about what happened.
Yes.
All right. And one of the things you said yesterday is that you felt you and your dad needed to find out what was happening.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And so one of the things that you said yesterday was that you thought first that Mr. Arbery, the man you'd seen on February 11th, may be the one who had run by.
Yes.
Then you said that you thought maybe Matt had seen him.
That's correct.
And Matt is Mr. Albente?
Yes.
Then you said He may have broken in.
Correct.
And then you said maybe Larry English is over on his property.
Yes.
And later you indicated that you thought that maybe Mr. Arbery had been caught.
Yes.
And then you said that you thought maybe he was trying to get away from the police.
Yes, ma'am.
But you hadn't heard any sirens or anything in the neighborhood.
Not yet. No, ma'am.
So I want to talk to you about some of the legal terms that you used yesterday, okay? All right, so first I want to talk to you kind of about probable cause, all right? And you testified yesterday that you'd been trained in the military for the Coast Guard, that even when you had arrest powers, before you could arrest somebody, you needed probable cause, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you even gave the jury the definition of probable cause, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. You said it was a level of suspicion by a reasonable and prudent person, given the overall circumstances, to believe a crime has been committed.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. But that's really only half the definition, isn't it?
That's what I was taught in my training, was that definition right there.
So, isn't it correct that, well, let me ask it this way. Didn't you learn from your training that you need two parts?
Reasonable suspicion first, and then probable cause.
So, isn't it true from your training that you need two parts of probable cause? You need probable cause that a crime has actually been committed, and that the person you're arresting is the one who committed the crime.
That would be correct.
All right. But you left out the second part, that you actually have to have probable cause that the person you're arresting is actually the one committing the crime.
That makes sense. I mean, that was the person that I assumed that was committing the crime. That was the probable cause was him.
So you assumed he was the one committing the crime.
Yes.
All right, so you'd agree that as law enforcement, when you were there in the military as a boarding officer, that even if you know a crime is committed, when you have several suspects, you can't just go and arrest the first suspect. You have to actually have evidence that that person is the one who committed that crime, correct?
That's correct, and I believe I had it with the videos that I've seen with him, with Mr. Arbery being the one that has been there multiple times, and then what I witnessed on the 11th with him sneaking through those yards, or through that yard, and then the way that he reacted to me when I put the lights on him, reacted like he was going for a gun, and then went into that house after we had our altercation, and then Mr. Albenzi being there that same evening and verified that on the video is the same guy that he's seen, and then seeing Mr. Albenzi pointing down the road led to probable cause, and then Dad saying that was the same individual at the probable cause, that it is the same guy that has been in that house that has been breaking into and stuff has been stolen. So the overall, the totality of everything led me to go down there and see if that was him.
So the totality of all of that led you to go see Phantom?
Yes,
Meaning the guy you'd seen on the 11th.
correct.
All right, so you used the word totality of the circumstances a whole bunch here, haven't you?
Yes, I guess. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So let's go ahead and back up for a second. You had your gun stolen, correct?
I did.
On January 1st, 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
And you had a suspect in mind for that theft of that gun, correct?
Yes, when I got the videos from Ms. Perez, Diego, looking through, there was a truck that came through that I haven't seen in the neighborhood before. And after looking at the truck, I thought that it might have been some teenagers that I would see on that part of the county. And it turned out that it was a neighbor on the other side, and then that was as far as I went with that.
Who's David Sorrells?
I have no idea.
Really?
Yes, ma'am.
He's not a Facebook friend of yours?
Not that I believe.
Would it help to refresh your recollection if you looked at some of your Facebook posts that you shared with Mr. Sorrells?
Absolutely.
All right, go ahead and take a look at this.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we're still here. Thank you.
Go ahead and take a look at the yellow highlighted part.
Yeah, I remember.
All right, do you know who David Sorrells is?
I do not.
All right.
He must have been on the neighborhood page. I do remember the message now, and I believe he must saw it on the neighborhood Facebook page.
All right, so on January 1st, he says he's sorry about your gun being stolen out of your car. Is that right?
Yes, that's what he wrote.
All right, and then you indicated that you had a pretty good feeling about who stole it,
Yes, ma'am.
and you found out where he lived. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you'd been watching him for several days.
Yes.
That was not Mr. Arbery.
No, that was the truck I was telling you about.
Okay. And you then indicated that this may be the same individual who has been causing trouble in the neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But that's not Mr. Arbery.
No, ma'am.
So why, in your written statement, 2 hours after the homicide, do you put down the very first sentence? On January 1st of 2020, approximately between 9 and 10:30, I had my vehicle broken into and my Smith & Wesson gun stolen out of my truck.
Because I was aware of things of burglaries and vehicles being broken into the neighborhood, and then on top of seeing what I saw on the 11th, that there are things being broken into. I was under concern that Mr. Arbery could be a suspect in this, or he could not be. But like I said prior, he is the one that I have seen, and he is the one that has been in that house several times. So, of course, I'm thinking he's a suspect. But I don't know if it was him or the other people that they've seen or if I've heard about.
So, given you don't know who stole your gun, there was no probable cause to arrest Mr. Arbery for the theft of your handgun on January 1st, 2020.
No, ma'am.
You also didn't know who had stolen the items out of the boat, Mr. Larry English's boat, did you?
No, but I had a probability. I was thinking that the probability of who was doing that was the one that continued to go into this house, that has been caught in this house several times, which was Mr. Arbery.
But you had no evidence he'd ever taken anything off of Mr. English's boat.
Other than that there's been stuff stolen out of that house and that he has been in that house several times.
So you have stolen items on the boat, and you got that from your mom.
Yes.
And then you got him inside the construction site, right? Inside 220.
Yes, ma'am.
And at the point in time, on February 23rd, you knew about October 25th,
Yes.
November 18th,
Yes.
and February 11th.
Yes.
You also knew that the white couple had gone in on November 17th, right?
I did.
You also knew that there was a shady-looking guy under the bridge, correct?
I did.
And you also suspected this guy in the neighborhood with the truck may have been the one who stole your handgun. He might have also been someone who was stealing things in the neighborhood, as you said to Mr. Sorrells, right?
For a couple of days, they decided that that was not him. Or it was not the person that had the truck, that I thought it was a different truck. So by letting that's not.
Is that Rob Way?
I don't know who Rob Way is.
So Kim Ballesteros didn't tell you that she suspected Rob Way in the neighborhood as being the one who stole her purse out of her car January 30th?
Not that I recall, no ma'am.
And you're telling this jury that your mother never told you that Larry English suspected his contractors?
No ma'am.
All right, so about February 11th. I want to make sure yesterday, when you testified, did you testify that Mr. Arbery actually came toward you and started lifting up his shirt?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, but you never said that before to anyone, did you?
I put it in the statement.
The statement, your handwritten statement?
The written statement, I believe I did.
Can I hand you a copy of your handwritten statement?
Sorry, is that Marcus who did it?
I said I reached into his pants on the written statement.
Right, so in your statement, you indicated that I was getting out of my car to ask him what he was doing.
This is a written statement?
Correct.
Okay.
And he turned toward my vehicle and reached into his pants, which led me to think that he may have a weapon.
Yes, ma'am.
Reach like that into his pants?
No. That's,
And then you indicated I immediately put my car in reverse and the individual went into the house under construction, correct?
yes, ma'am.
And that was... Oh, I know. All right, can everybody see now? Okay. And that was the publishing of State's Exhibit 120, the video clip entitled Video MP4. Is that your car pulling down?
It is, yes, ma'am.
Now right here, Mr. Arbery have anything in his hands?
Not I can see, no, ma'am.
Have a backpack with him?
He did not.
Any sort of bag with him?
Not at that time, no, ma'am.
No. He's wearing a big long t-shirt, isn't he?
Yes.
And shorts cut off at the knees.
I think they were cargo shorts, but yes.
And he's got running shoes on.
I can't tell.
You see the Nike logo swoosh in the reflection?
No, ma'am.
I'll back it up for you. See it then?
No, ma'am.
That was State's Exhibit 117 that I just published. Now, that particular evening, you've seen the body cam video of Officer Rash, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Officer Rash told you and told your father that Larry English said Mr. Arbery had never taken or stolen anything from the open unsecured construction site. Is that correct?
My understanding was never saw him take anything from there. Yes, ma'am. Never saw anything taken.
Okay. And Larry English actually had never had anything stolen from the open unsecured construction site.
Yes, he had stuff stolen out of his boat that was inside that house. Yes, ma'am.
But you didn't investigate that crime as a law enforcement officer, correct?
No, ma'am.
Because you weren't a law enforcement officer, were you?
That's correct.
All right. And your father wasn't a law enforcement officer either.
He was not.
Okay. So you're basing your probable cause on something that was rumor that your mother told you about things being stolen off the boat.
I was basing it on the 11th for seeing him in there again and hearing that the stuff was stolen off of that boat, and then hearing it from the other neighbors, and then from seeing on the 11th. So, yes, it happened, and then seeing him come in multiple times, and then everything that followed up on the 23rd, yes, that's...
You were here when Officer Rash testified, is that right?
I was.
Okay, and you heard Officer Rash, under cross-examination, answer the defense attorney's question about if Mr. Larry English had filed a police report about items stolen off of his boat, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he said the officer assigned would have investigated it, right?
Yes.
All right. And that means interviewing Larry English, correct?
Yes.
And so an officer who's investigating the theft of items off the boat would have found out from Larry English that the boat had been moved back and forth to Douglas, correct?
Objection, speculation now. She's asking him about to assume what Officer Rash would have done had he been asked to make a report about thefts by Larry English, and then how he would follow up on that. This is all speculation on the witness's part.
Speculating as to what Rash would have done, if that's sustained.
I'll ask a better question, Your Honor. On cross-examination, do you remember Officer Rash testifying that the officer assigned, if Mr. English had filed a report, would have investigated that?
Yes.
Okay, and that Officer Rash, you heard him testify that that would have included interviewing Larry English, correct?
Yes.
All right, and you heard Larry English testify that the boat had been moved back and forth between Douglas, correct?
He learned that, yes.
Well, he didn't learn that, he knew it. He'd moved the boat back and forth, right?
You talking about Rash or
Says, I object. I'm not sure what the relevance is about asking him what he heard people testify in court if he didn't know with his own personal knowledge on particular dates. Hearing what people later come and testify about in court is asking him to comment on the testimony before the jury. It doesn't seem to be a relevant inquiry. What he did and what he knew in those particular times, I think, sure. But what they testify about in court and how that may change his thoughts about dates in the past doesn't appear to be relevant.
It's overruled. Go ahead.
Okay. And you heard Larry English testify that he suspected his subcontractors? Yes? That Larry English suspected his subcontractors of having stolen the items off of his boat. You heard him testify to that?
Here, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you heard him testify that he told that to Officer Rash?
Yes.
And you heard Officer Rash testify that he told that to your father?
Yes.